Do you often struggle to figure out which information is actually correct when you're learning about fitness or health or nutrition or anything like that? If so, you're not alone. I personally often experience not being able to decipher which pieces of information are actually correct. There's literally tens, maybe upwards of 20, maybe even more than that, different styles of dieting and advanced training techniques and how to squat, how to bench press. There's literally millions and millions of differing opinions on the correct way to diet, the correct way to lift weights, the correct way to just have a generally healthy lifestyle. On one end of the spectrum, you have people who worry about, think that the pH of their blood is relevant to health, and other people think it doesn't matter what you do, it all comes down to calories and so on and so forth. And the truth of the matter is that with most of these things, there's probably some middle ground. Another good example is the low carb people. I'm personally a proponent of low carb, but only because of what I believe that actually means. I think that removing carbs for people who typically have a carb-centric diet is a fairly appropriate way to reduce calories. But again, that's my opinion. It differs from everybody else's opinion. Now, the reason that I wanted to talk about this today is because earlier today I was listening to a Joe Rogan Experience podcast, something that I frequent, and he had C.T. Fletcher. Now, you might be familiar with C.T. Fletcher, about one of the strongest dudes that you've never heard of. He's the creator of It's Still Your Motherfucking Set, for lack of better terms. And he was talking about how a lot of people, post stuff online and, especially form of their exercises and, different ideas of what they're doing, perhaps the sort of diet that they're going on. And the problem is that everybody shits on them for doing that. If your opinion happens to be slightly different from somebody else's in terms of health and nutrition and fitness and how you should lift and optimal ways to lift, you basically just get shit on by everybody who has a differing opinion. And that was really why I wanted to address this topic today, because I think it's ridiculous. And the reason I say that, and this primarily has to do with how much time I've spent in school. Okay, I've spent over a decade in school, pursuing things that really mattered to me. Got an advanced degree. I'm by all means considered an expert in health and fitness, but that doesn't mean that everybody else's opinion is wrong. That's the beautiful thing about research, and why I like to study research, is because there's totally different perspectives and different ideas and different possibilities that could be going on that, if you decide that you're going to stick with one opinion and one opinion only and never waver regardless of what's presented to you, that's a problem, in my opinion. Just last week, I reviewed a paper about researchers who determined that spot-reducing body fat might actually be a possibility. Now, initially, when you read a headline like that, you've been conditioned that, it's impossible to spot-reduce body fat. Everybody thinks that that's the truth. But is it really all that surprising that there's a possible way to manipulate how your body uses energy? In my opinion, it's totally possible. You think about all the different responses that people have to every different type of diet. You have people who are successful on a ketogenic style of dieting, where you virtually eat no carbohydrate except perhaps some fiber and some residual carbohydrate from vegetables. Whereas other people, if you've never heard of Alberto Nunez of 3D Muscle Journey, this dude eats 400 to 500 carbohydrates when he's cutting. So what does that mean when he's not cutting? It doesn't matter. What I'm just trying to point out is that every individual has a different response to just about any style of nutrition, dieting, endurance exercise, weight training. And those differences should all be celebrated to let us all understand that there's like an infinite number of possible ways to manipulate the body. And really, that's what I do as, a coach and a writer. I try and present every possible idea out there and then let you make your own decision on what's appropriate for you. That's something that's often lost on a lot of people because everybody's like trying to be right. They're trying to get their opinion out there, well, I heard that low carb isn't possible, or it's not beneficial, or, I experienced this when I dieted with a ketogenic style of dieting, and therefore nobody else should be using it, or it's terrible, believe me. That sort of stuff happens all the time. And I think it's just ridiculous. I think what should happen is that you should take information that's presented to you and then analyze that information critically. Think about what you're being told. Does it make sense that insulin is the sole driver behind whether or not you can lose weight? In my opinion, no. But I believe that insulin could still play a role. I'm not saying that insulin can't play a role, and I'm not saying that insulin is the reason that you're getting fat or that you can't lose weight. I'm saying it's possible. But the fact of the matter is that you have people on one side saying that insulin doesn't matter, and you have people on another side saying that insulin is the driver behind weight loss and or weight gain. So I get it. It's hard to figure out what's correct. But what I suggest that you always do is you look at the information that's presented to you and then just think about it for a minute. Does it make sense? Is it rational? What is the opposing view? Is that argument rational? Is that argument not rational? So you can make these informed decisions by informing yourself and then deciding for yourself. It's okay if you're into a ketogenic style of dieting, but your best friend thinks that it's bullshit. It doesn't matter. You have to figure out what works best for you and also be willing to pivot that stance. Like, consider that I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting. I'm a big proponent of intermittent fasting, one, because I've spent a lot of time researching it, and two, because I think that the principles behind it are sound. I think that intermittent fasting does potentially have, some benefit that other styles of dieting don't. But that doesn't mean, one, that intermittent fasting is the best diet. It might not be. It might not even be the best diet for me personally. I just like doing it. It works good for me, and the principles behind it are logical, they're sound, and they're something that I believe in. So that's something that I implore you to do in your own practice. Just because you don't have a high level of knowledge doesn't mean that you can't make informed decisions and can't make your own decisions, because everybody's trying to tell you that their opinion is right, but what most people forget is that you have to find the opinion that's most right for you. Whether that's a dieting style or a different training style. It's okay to be skeptical and to find evidence for why you're doing something, but it's also really important, to believe in your own intuition and figure out what works out best for you, because really that's what's most fun. 6 years ago when I was first introduced to the style of intermittent fasting, by my friend Sean Golden of buildingaleanbody.com, my first reaction was like, oh, that's ridiculous. You're spending significant portions of the day not eating. Of course your muscle is just going to, fall off the bone, or it's going to create bad habits, or you'll be really hungry, or you won't be able to function. All these different arguments that were presented to me, or things that came up at first, and then I looked at the information, I thought about it rationally and logically, and it made sense, so I gave it a shot. And 6 years later, I'm still doing it. I'm not saying that'll happen with you, but what I'm saying is that just because an idea seems somewhat foreign to you and you have other people telling you that it's not true, doesn't mean that that's actually the truth. You have to make that truth for yourself, and you have to just go with stuff. Stop waiting for other people's approval. Like, when I first started, working on my website, and even to this day, my number one fear is that people will negatively criticize and think that I'm stupid for the things that I think. And, that makes sense. I'm trying to run a business here. It can be difficult, and, it is scary because from my perspective, I don't want to say something just off the top of my head just to try and sound smart. Like, I almost never comment on Facebook because so many people are just taking the route of saying, you're wrong, I'm right, listen to what I'm saying, it doesn't matter. And I don't believe in that. I believe in open discussion about things. You should be able to talk about your own opinion and then let other people dictate whether or not your opinion is appropriate or not. Don't just, fall into this trap of, Lane Norton said that insulin doesn't matter, and I'm not saying that he said that verbatim, but he's been a avid proponent against, the very same people that I'm talking about, the people who say insulin is the driver behind fat gain, and there's nothing else, to put into the argument. And in light of not extending this video any further, that's the whole point of this. It's okay to have your own opinions. It's okay to look at information and think critically about it. Just because an expert tells you to do something doesn't necessarily mean that that's exactly the way that you have to do it. It's just a suggestion, and that's all that I try to do. I'm trying to give you all the different options that you can choose from so that you can choose the best one that works for you. So I think that about wraps it up for today's video. If you liked what you heard, consider giving this video a like. And if you really, really enjoyed what you saw, please consider subscribing to my channel. I really appreciate it. So thanks again for stopping by, and I'll talk to you next time.